Hello, my name is Brandon, and welcome to The Bridge, music podcast where Zach and myself discuss new music in hopes to bridge fans to bands. Now, I have my latte with me again today. Zach, do you have your tea?
Finished my tea before the podcast, and now I'm sipping on a cold beer from the Czech Republic, Kozel.
I was wondering this a little bit last week, and I'm wondering this week. What kind of tea do you drink? What's your go-to tea?
I've been drinking a lot of green tea recently, actually. I'm more of a coffee guy,
Mm-hmm.
and so then in the evenings I shift to tea, but I don't want the caffeine,
Mm-hmm.
so I can sleep. So yeah, I've been drinking a lot of green tea, trying to keep it healthy.
So this week we have an album called Welfare Jazz by Viagra Boys, and this is quite a different album from last week. Last week, a rap album, very deep. This week, it's a Swedish post-punk new wave band, thick in satire and sense of humor, dark tones. Don't take themselves very serious. It's not a deep lyrically. In fact, I follow these guys on Facebook and Twitter, and on one of the two, they posted this post made me laugh. I don't know if you see this on YouTube, but Genius has this little video series or whatever where they get people on to do deep dives into the lyrics, and
Okay.
they they posted they can't wait for Genius to call to explain how deep they are. So as we get into this album, I think why that's so funny will become a little bit more obvious.
To comment on that, I think maybe there's a bit of a conceit in what they're saying because yeah, okay, the lyrics may seem a little bit superficial on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
I think actually musically, like the idea
Mm-hmm.
is deeper than what it initially seems to be, and it
Right.
only reveals yourself once you really dig into the album, give it a couple listens, and yeah, see what the band are doing musically.
I think they're playing the fool, but they're more than that. They're signed to Year One. It's kind of spelt like year 0001, so I'm not sure how they want that pronounced, but we're gonna call them Year One. It's also a label employs Young Lean, which pretty popular kind of a mumble rap emo rapper from the area. Some people might be familiar with him. So that's the same label. I found that interesting. So what did you expect going into this album, or what had you heard about Viagra Boys before we sat down with this album?
Well, this is their sophomore release, yeah? So their debut release came out in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Street Worms. And that album is completely out to lunch, incredibly zany, is in the same spirit as, like the Stooges mixed with Ween and the Dead Kennedys.
Yep.
And that album was an incredible debut release. And so in a way, Welfare Jazz is it has the task of trying to emerge out of the shadow of the success of their debut album.
Yeah, and that was a thought I had going into this as well. Not a lot of bands will succeed in following up a great album debut. We've seen it countless times. You know, the first album is always was always the best. And some bands take like 2 or 3 albums before they hit their stride. But these guys come at punching. So for their sophomore release, it's kind of like, can they keep it up? Can they keep the pace going? What is it? How are they going to change the sound at all? Like, where do you go with your second release after such a strong first release?
Welfare Jazz, it's definitely a Viagra Boys record, but with a slight change.
Yeah,
It's more focused.
It took me about halfway through this album, and I start thinking to myself, like, wait a second, there's something a little different going on here, and so a few things start coming to my attention that kind of the humor in me a bit. But I think we'll get to that as we go through the tracks. So yeah, there was an aspect of this album that definitely surprised me as I went through, but I was generally positive on this album, actually.
I also finally concluded that yes, I like this album. I like it a lot, actually. But the first time I listened to it, I was very lukewarm about it, and went back and listened to Streetworms, and
Uh-huh.
then became very nostalgic about Streetworms, and then it was only when I returned to Welfare Jazz and gave it a couple more spins that it really started to grow on me, and I appreciated it for what it was. The same Viagra Boys, but with just a different perspective.
Yeah. I think we're beating the bear in the bush a smidge. I
Uh
think
huh.
we should just say this is a synth pop album. This is like this. I came in expecting post punk mostly, and this was more new wave synth pop at times.
Yeah, that's what threw me off when I listened to it the first time. It has this oscillating vibe between synth pop, progressive rock, sometimes sort of kraut rockish, and
Mm-hmm.
then post punk.
Right.
And there are specific tracks that combine all these elements together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for me sort of the crowning achievement of this record.
I had a different experience with my first listen than you did.
Hmm.
I had a very positive first experience, which is
Okay.
usually a alarm bell sign for me because I always take 2 or 3 listens to like something. I quite frequently loathe things on my first listen. Uh, but I listened to this and I got up and I was putting my laundry away, and that first infectious bass that just
Hmm.
rumbles in on Ain't Nice, and
Hmm.
I was bopping around my room, putting clothes away, drinking my latte. I was having a blast. I got halfway through the song, got all my laundry not song, album, had all my laundry put away, and I was ecstatic. I was like, this is
Yeah.
perfect. This was great. It's so infectious, so catchy, so gummy.
Yeah.
There's so many tracks that you can walk away with singing for the rest of the day. 100%.
Yeah, especially the more post-punk orientated tracks, they
Mhm.
have such a catchy bass line, man.
Yeah, I think every one of these songs has something that's got an energy to it that really
Uh-huh.
just pushes the song forward, and they're not all these super complicated bass lines or anything like that. They're not slapping bass. They're not doing all these technical stuff. It's just one gummy, super infectious bass line on the bottom that just goes through the whole song, and then there's a bunch of stuff on top of it.
They're bass lines that you can just bop to, like you'd
Mhm.
wanna get in the mosh pit and just bounce off other human bodies. They're just bopping bass lines.
Absolutely. This album is super catchy. I think it's going to be an easy listen for a lot of people, especially if it's your first. If you didn't come from Streetworms and have like a preconceived notion, it's going to be easy jump in. I think.
Just one more comment about the band before we get into specific analysis about the tracks.
Absolutely.
I wanna mention, you said, yeah, they're from Sweden, they hail from Stockholm, and in
Hmm.
fact, some of the members,
Hmm.
maybe all of them, but I know for sure some of them are actually they actually went to music school. They're classically trained jazz musicians, so
Oh,
they have a very strong, technical background.
that's
And
really interesting.
so this idea of welfare jazz, yeah, it's sort of bridging this high and low culture,
Hmm.
and I think it comes through in the music between the content of the lyrics and then the sophistication of the music.
That both really surprises me and doesn't surprise me at all. Uh,
Uh-huh.
from the context of the music that you find on this album and how it's composed, that doesn't surprise me at all. When you look at the lead singer and see that he's got something tattooed in the middle of his forehead, it kind of surprises me.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you look at this guy, he looks like 3 sheets to the wind, and he's got this weird stick and poke tattoo in the middle of his forehead, and he kind of looks like a goof. So, but he exudes the personality of this record.
Yeah, definitely. We should mention that prior to the podcast, we'd never speak about anything our thoughts about the record or our experience with the record. Everything, yeah, occurs on the podcast.
Absolutely. The first time I hear anything of your thoughts at all is when we sit down to talk about this album. So honestly, until I hear what you say, I have no idea if you like this album.
Yeah.
I think that you'll hear a lot of genuine reactions from that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that you wanted to comment on before we hit to the track reviews?
No. I just thought it was important to mention that, yeah, these guys are, they've got some real, music chops.
They do, and it, not knowing that, they prove it. I think. Ain't Nice is the first track. That Infectious Basic caught me right away. There's a no wave style saxophone that just kind of like lingers at parts of the song that are super good. There's a lot of unconventional sounds that I thought when I was listening to this in my initial listen, and I'm expecting post punk, right? A lot of that kind of soundscape. So there was a point I'm like, is there laser beams going off in this track? Like it doesn't come off weird per se, but like when I was listening to it, I was like, this just seems like this complete chaos of like laser beam noises are going off at one point in this infectious track. And I'm like, what's going on? I was a little confused, but like I was super into it. Like the personality of the track oozes through. It's like your uncle that just got out of prison, who came by and bought a bunch of weed for your party with all you and your friends. That's this album's personality.
Yeah,
It's just like
you're a little bit estranged by it, but at the same time, it's incredibly entertaining, and you just you can't deny it.
Yeah, there's a sense of wholesomeness to it. Like there's goodwill there, but like completely degenerate at the same time.
Yeah, very depraved.
What'd you think of the Ain't Nice?
Ain't nice. So, like you said, laser beams in the background, and then also sort of, yeah, definitely more these punkish type vocals. The gain
Mm-hmm.
seems like it's turned up on the vocals on the mic.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of gives it this distorted effect,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it has the sort of this catchy bass, and then that no wave sort of discordant sax, and it's one of those tracks on this album that bridges both the styles together. The sort of new wave electronic sound, this with the synths and everything, and the sort of post punk aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
the aesthetic is
it,
post punk, absolutely.
yeah, and it was it sort of threw me off a little bit going into it with the expectations from the previous record on my
Right.
first listen, right?
The first record I remember being more straightforward post punk.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
There are tracks on this album that don't have guitars on them. Right? You just got your bass and you got your drum. Sometimes sounds like a drum machine, but I don't think so. I think it's just the rhythm.
Do you know Suicide?
Vaguely.
Okay, yeah. Well, anyways, those guys just pretty well laid down crazy vocals and lyrics and had a drum machine.
Right,
And
right.
sometimes this record sometimes is in that vein.
Right.
Of course, more textured, but
So yeah, like and I think another part to this about there being classic trained. This is one of those songs, like you said, where they bring those elements together so well, and I just think this track is composed so well. Like the layers that are put down, when the song changes and when it introduces new ideas, it's paced super well. There's like a high intellect behind the way that this song is composed, even though on like the surface it is very simple, it's very straightforward, it's gummy, it just catches you. You don't have to super pay attention to any of these tracks. I don't think these are easy emotion tracks, get you in a vibe and a bot, easy driving tracks,
yeah.
Toad is the next track. I'm taking these in order a little bit, and I know we didn't do that last time. I'm taking this in order a little bit because there's a little bit of a narrative for me with my listening that came up a little bit. So Toad comes next, which is the first time where they kind of like take a rock and roll song. Like the lyrics are talking about like hound dog hooting and hollering, and it's got that kind of like Elvis kind of tinge to it. It's complete warping of that. It's like an Elvis song looking through a funhouse mirror.
You want to know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Doors at their best. Like, just you said it earlier, killer driving music.
Mm-hmm.
I read the biography of the Doors written
Mm-hmm.
by the drummer, who I
Okay.
forget now. Anyways, he was talking about when they just first became famous and break on through was coming on the radio, and he was driving down Sunset Boulevard or somewhere in LA, and he said like he started speeding like crazy and not sort of realizing it was his own song. And he was like, "Man, we created driving music." And
Yeah.
Toad is definitely yeah, a song I would not want to play while I was driving on the highway because I would probably yeah, get a ticket.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's not like they're like metal songs, not like in like that aggressive driving. It's like uh fun, I guess. Like everything on here is fun, you know.
Yeah. This is the first track that, for me, of course, it's only the second track really on the album. It's listed
Mm-hmm.
as number 3, but the interlude aside, it has that catchy bass that you just want to bop to,
Mm-hmm.
and just it's simple but so catchy.
Mm-hmm. This is I was looking through the lyrics as I was going through this, and this is the track that made, because I had seen their tweet about Genius before I listened to it.
Uh huh.
This is the track that I was looking at the lyrics and I had to laugh to myself um, about how straightforward everything is,
Hmm.
and like there's not a lot of deep meaning and a lot of lyricism here. Like the first song, "Ain't Nice," that's basically the entire idea behind the track. He's not a nice guy. You go to
Hmm.
Toad. This is the one where his woman wants him to settle down, and he's like, "Nah, not happening. I ain't going up into the country." And so like there's like character portrait of a person being painted throughout these tracks a bit, and it's about around creatures maybe, or I feel alive. I realized that this is a concept record.
Yeah, it's a concept record, and it's coming out of the singer-songwriter tradition, which becomes incredibly obvious on the final track.
Right. I have a funny story about that track actually. Let's jump to a little bit. The narrative throughout the we'll go back and look at some of the other tracks. I think Secret Canine Agent deserves a little bit of attention, but let's get a little bit of a whole scope here. Like so kind of the concept of this album is this caricature. We've kind of described it like kind of this like degenerate individual. Doesn't want to settle down, does his own thing. It is the
Uh,
personality of what the lead singer looks like. I'll be honest with you. If uh, and so like you get to this song Toad, and that's kind of him proclaiming, his individuality and like not wanting to move to the country and stuff like that.
the mantra on that song, the lyric that he repeats the most, and that is perhaps representative of toxic masculinity, and that I must admit, and I'm sure many other guys would admit too, they have probably said the following phrase that functions as a type of mantra
Hmm.
for this song: "I don't need no woman to tell me what to do."
Yeah, girl, if
And
you ain't my
he
mama, please don't try to be.
yeah.
I've said that "you're not my mom" line in an argument before. I've thrown that out.
Yeah.
I'm guilty.
And I think, the album, when you listen to the lyrics, okay, these lyrics, it just sort of seems superficial, but
Mhm.
really, is it a critique of this type of behavior? And I think as the album progresses, perhaps, yeah, in fact, it is.
Yeah, there's like there's simplicity here in the middle of complexity. And I think
Mhm.
there's a little bit of a scope involved here. So you get Toad, and you get around to "I Feel Alive," where he talks about getting sober, and "I Feel Alive," pretty self-explanatory kind of track, but again, super infectious, super gummy, super catchy, and it goes into uh, to the country where he changed his mind. He wants to go to the country with her. It's the antithesis of Toad.
It's the counterpoint.
Right. And then we get to this very interesting track at the end here, In Spite of Ourselves, which is a John Prine cover.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know the first time I listened to this.
Okay.
So my first listen, I had a very different take than what I ended up coming away with it. I listened to this and I thought I took it as a parody. Like I hadn't clued into the concept of the album quite. I was still listening to a lot of instrumentation and digesting all that. That when I came to this this like country song, I was a little like I took it as part of the personality of them. I know in the last album they made fun of people as well. I'm trying to remember what track that was. It was a super parody song. There's like Slow Learner Down the Basement. Sports was what I'm thinking of. Sports makes fun
sports.
makes fun of those beefy people, super into sports and stuff, not that anything wrong with sports, but it was kind of like the personality of it. So I kind of took that as this album's sports, right? The lyrics are super goofy, panty sniffing. He ain't got laid in a month of Sundays. Like these lines, like they fit so well into this album, into this album's personality that I thought it was an original song. And they were just kind of making fun of that country kind of Dolly Parton duet is what I had written until I realized this was a cover. And it's a John Prine cover, and these are the exact lyrics that he wrote. And then suddenly, in the concept of the album and the story, I flipped my opinion on this completely. This is a tribute, this is a tribute song. This is like an earnest, well-meant tribute song. This isn't making fun of anybody. This is like, if anything, a wholesome love letter to John Prine.
In the introduction, we were talking about how the album is more focused than Streetworms, how it's a slight shift in perspective, though the band retain their personality, their eclectic sound. And this, if it didn't dawn on you prior to the cover of In Spite of Ourselves, the cover anchors the album in the singer-songwriter tradition that I think it's honoring, but at the same time is also parodies.
Yeah, it takes the piss out of them a bit, but like
it takes the piss out of them a bit. But I think the lyrics make it obvious that this is it's written almost like a folk album. It's basically a narrative that develops from beginning to end.
Yeah, like there's a sense of satire amongst it all, but there's also a sense of respect and admiration amongst it, and it's this mixture of like mocking something lovingly.
And is that not reflected in the title, Welfare Jazz?
Absolutely.
This difference between high and low culture and parody and honoring.
Yeah, there's a lot to pull from some of their choices here, because like they get pretty weird at times. Like there's this dog theme that they go through this album that I was aloof about. Like it was just, I enjoyed it. Like it was goofy. Like it starts with this old dog, and it gives you that like, do you know? Is it Intercessions of the Tool song? It's like 11 minutes. And it's just like some guy talking about farm animals and the carrots and stuff like that. I can't quite remember the name of the song. I don't think it's Intermission, but something like that. Ingustipation or something.
Disgusticated.
Yeah, and Disgusticated. There we go.
Yeah.
So that's what this reminded me of, like this like preaching absurdity craziness where he's talking about the dog singing along with people, but like his voice is dissonant to everything else, and he doesn't care because he's his own man. He stands out, and like I was like, what is this? And it was like I was enjoying it because it was like so off the wall, but like there's a mantra in here, there's a theme in here in what's being said, and then the story continues. You get Best in Show, which is in the interlude later, and we're same kind of idea, just like putting this like magnifying glass on such trivial things and trying to make them bigger than they are, but they kind of got this like foggy, scuzzy gleam upon them before just straight up starting a song called Secret Canine Agent about all the dogs that are secret agents that are talking to him. And I assume some sort of drug binge because this comes right before I Feel Alive. Probably the moment of change in this person. If you're going to look at the narrative of the story, where he's like so stoned, he's like dogs lifting their paws or sending him messages. It's just like super goofy, super weird song, and not once does it stop being catchy.
Yeah, it's also the shortest track. It's only 1 minute and 45 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you could almost say it's like the most hardcore song on the album. So yeah, maybe you're right saying that. Yeah, it's a metaphor for like this huge bender that he goes on that then shows him the error of his ways when he, yeah, gets through it.
It's kind of relevant, like to these thoughts you might have watching TV in your underwear and drinking a beer and deep into whatever you're doing, whatever drug of your choice, and just seeing things in like a dog show you're watching on TV, and
Yeah,
just like the stories that like come to his head, and the narrative is like it just felt like this rock bottom kind of scenario.
yeah, the rock bottom scenario that is the pinnacle of depravity.
Right. Uh, it's such an interesting album. The more I listen to this,
And it's also paced great, no? Because like you said, you have Secret Canine Agent, and then it shifts into I Feel Alive, and it's sort of like okay, he's entered into rehab, and he's off. He's he's back on the wagon again. I guess you would say, yeah.
so last week I asked what you thought would be the best toe in song. I'm going to answer first this time because I think every single one of the singles are perfect toe in songs. If they want to just kind of, I think Ain't Nice is probably the song to go to.
So, Ain't Nice probably my least favorite track on the album, honestly.
Oh, really? That's interesting. What would
I just
you?
find it is deceptively complex once you listen to it, but lyrically it's just lyrically it's a little bit short on ideas. It's like a prologue to the
It
album, really.
is. It is like a prologue,
Uh-huh.
but I think that's super good about it. I think that's what I liked about it. It's like
Mhm.
it really sets the tone for what this album is musically. You get the energy, you get the personality of the character in question
Mhm.
super easily. It's like pretty shallow lyrically, but like all the lyrics are kind of at a level. Super great introduction to what you're going to be hearing on this album. I
Uh-huh.
think this is like the one of the better introduction tracks that you could ask for. So I'm going to disagree
Uh,
with you
yeah, when I listened to it, I wrote down eases you into the album, and
there. Right.
it isn't it does ease you in because the next full length song that we get is Toad, and
Mhm.
this is that driving song, that song that's full of fervor. It's got a higher tempo, and it wouldn't probably hit so hard if you didn't have this earlier track to ease you into the record, you know. And
Mhm.
so I think it's a overall in the grand scheme of the album, yeah, it serves its function and it works. But as a standalone song, yeah, I think there are better toe-in songs.
Okay.
Personally, I
Right.
would recommend if someone, yeah, wants another toe-in song that does a similar thing, listen
Mhm.
to the more krautrock orientated song "Shooter."
Okay.
Even though it's an instrumental track, it's a longer track, it has no
Mm.
lyrics, obviously, yeah, it's instrumental, but it
Okay.
bridges a lot of the musical ideas on the album, and
Okay.
so it'll give you if especially if you wanna listen to the music and, yeah, wanna listen to the music first before getting into the narrative,
Mhm.
"Shooter" would be a great song to dip your toes in, And then if not Shooter, I would go with Toad. Toad is probably my favorite track on the album, to be honest with you. I listened to it again just before we started the podcast.
Okay, perfect. I think honestly, there's a lot of tracks that if you take it the Secret Canine Agent subplot, and you focus on like the main tracks of the album. I think honestly, you could pick any of these songs and get a good idea of what's happening on this album. The personality and the tone is evident throughout. So any of the singles I think are great. Maybe like the cover of the John Prine sounds a little bit left field a bit.
It's definitely left field. When I first listened to it, I was like, okay, cool intro. It's a sort of tuned down a little bit more, and then all of a sudden, John Prine starts singing, and I'm completely weirded out. I'm like, what the hell's going on?
Right. That one aside, I think a lot of these songs you could really go with. Girls and Boys, I Feel Alive, Creatures, which is the most synth pop song on the entire album. We haven't talked about that.
Yeah.
Creatures
for sure.
is pure synth pop, I think. That's where they go to 11 on the synth pop functions. But it's super good, super catchy. Like, I don't have a complaint about it.
No, I'm glad they did one track that just went really deep on synth pop and the sort of new wave style. I wrote down it gives me MGMT vibes.
Yes, yeah, I agree. It does give me MGMT, especially their latest album.
I haven't listened to the latest album. I'm ashamed to say.
Oh, it's a super good one. You should definitely look into that. A lot of similar ideas on that, but less of that punk vibe. More into the synth pop. What didn't you like? What are your complaints about the album?
My complaints about the album. Okay, when I first listened to it, like the only song I really was the first track, and then the John Prine track because it was just so weird. But I've sort of warmed up to In Spite of Ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I alluded to earlier, the album has, before you even turn it on, has the issue of having to live in the shadow of the greatness of Streetworms. And the band's challenge, as is any other band's challenge, I guess, when they have such a strong debut, is to be able to have their next album not live in the long shadow that the success of their first record casts. However, and so when I first listened to the record, I was like, oh God, like I went and listened to Streetworms right after, and I turned on Sports, and there was sort of something familiar about the zaniness of that track that just I couldn't help but fall in love with again, more than I had fell in love with any individual track on Welfare Jazz.
So would you say that it lived up to Streetworms?
I would say it definitely does, and it's actually a more complex album than Streetworms. The band have really sort of in the matter of one album had showed their maturity, showed growth. To make this concept album, whereas their previous album is just sort of like a Ween record. It's really zany, all over the place, just toilet humor, lots of stupid jokes, but musically super complex and fun to listen to.
Right. So the idea I had listening to this album might surprise you is I came to a dilemma. Can I give in our second podcast a 10?
Yeah.
Is anyone going to take me serious if I walk away and I say that this is a 10 or 10 album on the second podcast? And then I'm like, I can't just give it a 9 because I don't want to give it a 10.
Yeah.
So I think I really love this album. This hit me immediately. Everything connects. Everything was groovy. Everything lingered with me. I had so much fun listening to it. Like, I don't have a complaint about this album.
There's not one track you were sort of like, for instance, let me ask you this question.
Sure.
Upon repeated listens, which track do you think would be the one that you would feel you would skip first, or you would skip of all the songs? Sorry.
Maybe 6 Shooter.
Shooter, yeah.
Maybe, because it is the longest. It doesn't have the lyrics, to add that some of that personality to it.
The humor.
But like I'd like Six Shooter. There's
Uh-huh.
like a lot to like. This is a good break in the middle of the album. Like I can find more things to compliment this album, that track about, than the opposite.
Yeah, to
Right?
critique.
Me saying to skip the track, I could easily go from start to end in this track several times over on this whole album. Easy. It would with no, and I have since listening to this, where I didn't want to skip anything. There's nothing that stood out to skip. I enjoyed the interludes. They're either too short to really want to skip, like 30, 40 seconds.
Yeah.
And they're also just like interesting. They're just like super out there and zany interludes that like are super engaging to listen to. And maybe after so many listens, those become skippable. After the effect kind of wears off, and maybe you skip Secret Canine Agent.
Well, they're so well integrated into the album and bridging one track to the other that I hardly even notice them. I hardly notice that I'm in an interlude when I'm listening to them.
A lot of times, like the only way I knew I was in an interlude really was I was following along with the lyrics and like and visually, like where am I in the album, keeping an eye on the pace and stuff. That's the only way I really would have known I was in interlude for some of these. Like they could have just been like starts of other songs, or ends of songs that you'll see those. I enjoyed the pace. It's not that long of an album. We got 40 minutes, I think. 13 songs. Most like 3 of those are interludes, I think. So you got 10 songs. It's concise. There's a few longer songs. Like In Spite of Ourselves are only really kind of long because it ends with like this minute long, like solid wall of noise and sounds, right? And that it's just like not in the original song, but it's like it kind of like plays the album out.
There's a repetition that takes place at the end of that track that is sort of just marks the end of the record and fades out. But I would, just to answer the question I posed to you, which track would I skip? It would either be the intro track or I Feel Free.
I Feel Free. Okay.
For
I
the
Feel Alive.
I Feel Alive, sorry. I have the title written down in German, and so
Okay.
yeah. And for the reason I would skip it is for the reason what you were just describing about the John Prine cover. It's one of the longer songs on the album, and musically, I would say maybe one of the less complex songs.
It is more of a jubilation kind of track.
It's sort of like a pool hall song,
Right. So after discussing this album, I'm curious, who would you recommend this album to?
I mean, anyone who likes hard rock, who likes punk, who likes post-punk. If you like singer-songwriter music, like if you like John Prine, Bob Dylan, outlaw country, Waylon Jennings, this album is for you, man.
I think a lot of people would like this record.
A lot of people would like this.
I'm a little arrogant because I love this record. I feel like a lot of people would like this record. It's just so catchy and poppy in the right ways that I think it's going to catch. It will catch a lot of people. It's an easy listen. There's not a lot of barriers here. Maybe the personality is a barrier if you're not really into that kind of like feeling in your music. That might be a barrier. But I think a lot of people should give this a shot. I think you'll definitely come around and join this. If you're a fan of MGMT's last album, I think if you're a fan of Queens of Stone Age, this could be a good transition. If you already know you like those.
Idols for sure, to use a contemporary example. I would say these two guys, these two bands, are definitely on the frontier of post-punk, contemporary post-punk music.
Idols and Viagra Boys.
Yeah.
I also think there's an Australian band, Tropical F Storm, that is pretty good as well. I think they're all kind of this conglomerate of this new age post-punk that I really enjoy.
Yeah, Tropical F Storm. Yeah, their music is it kind of blows my mind, honestly.
As well,
and I love that their Spotify bio says something like, "We don't make boring music." and
They do not.
perhaps in a little bit more of a crass way, since that's kind of their style. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Any kind of closing thoughts you want to put about this? Like, do you have a number associated with this? Do you have a score?
I definitely have a number associated with it. But before I reveal my score, I want to mention the vocals on the album,
Sure.
because there's a pretty incredible vocal performance from the vocalist. I should have looked up his name, never beforehand. But if you are a fan of, I'll draw specific comparisons to other bands and specific songs. If you like The Changeling, late era LA Woman Doors, the track Girls and Boys channels this version of Jim Morrison incredibly, with a lot of these sort of drunken and uh, invigorating oohs and ahs. And
Mm-hmm.
even the track I Feel Alive reminded me of LA Woman a bit, because on that record, LA Woman, Jim Morrison actually sang from the bathroom, and that's why his vocals sound a little bit distant and echoey. And on
That's
that,
cool.
on I Feel Alive, it has that sort of pool hall feel as well, and it sounds like he's singing from the bathroom, like away from the band somewhere, you know.
Right.
And
There's kind of an ambience on all these tracks, either on the vocals or otherwise, that is kind of scuzzy and dirty. That I think comes out in the vocals a lot in those tracks.
Girls and Boys would be the best example, in my opinion, of the scuzziness. If you like the depravity on the record, Girls and Boys is great, because
Mhm.
the lyrics actually sort of disintegrate into just garbled. Yeah, not the speech disintegrates essentially at some points, and it sounds just like somebody who's totally wasted trying to string together a sentence, and yeah, they're inarticulate.
Yeah,
It's great.
this album is the drunk at the party. That's the life of the party. Um,
Yeah. And
so
but that you can also see has a deep pain inside.
mhm. And a heart of gold.
Mhm.
So yeah, what how'd you ultimately in the end? Where is this album ranking for you?
In the end, it's because, like I alluded to, there are maybe one or two tracks that I would skip after repeated listens, maybe.
Hmm.
So I can't give it a 10
Okay.
for that reason.
I
And
respect that.
so I'm definitely between this area between 8 and 9, and for
Hmm.
me, I think it ascends to the 9 realm because of because of what they achieve artistically, being able to walk this thin line between pastiche, parody, and innovation, and they honor, you know, this singer-songwriter tradition, this outlaw country tradition,
Hmm.
while at the same time they make fun of it. They don't lose their sense of humor either, which
Hmm.
was part of what championed the first record,
Hmm.
and that's incredibly hard to do.
Hmm.
And then yeah, musically and lyrically, the album is just exceptional. So yeah, a nod from me.
Uh, for me, it comes down to what do I want my tens to represent?
Mhm.
Um, is this album groundbreaking? Maybe not. You know, maybe this isn't a cornerstone transition in music. This album didn't make me cry. I don't know if this album is going to like destroy barriers and knock down doors and be a grand statement. But at the same time, this is fun beginning to end. There's it's just so catchy, vibrant, so much personality. The performances are great, so much diversity and variety. It's hard to get bored listening to this. And in terms of like wanting a perfect album to just sit down and listen to and like use in like a day to day, it might not challenge you in like preposterous ways and like really like make you sit and think like something like a brass would, right?
Mhm.
There's not that like intellectual challenge. with this album, really.
Not necessarily.
Not
I think
necessarily.
it can be deceptively smarter than it comes off as. But yeah,
Absolutely.
it's not really heady, for instance. Yeah.
No, but I don't think that is what I want my 10 to be. I want my 10 to be, this is just a universal fun album. It is what it is. It set out and accomplished in flying colors everything it needed to do. I think this is just as good as, if not better than, Streetworms.
Mm-hmm.
With several ways. Both are great albums, I'm super excited about a third album and a fourth album, and I want to see how long they can keep the streak going. This is like a 9.5 to a 10 for me.
Yeah.
I'm only skeptical of like leaving room to grow. What I don't know. Maybe I just haven't heard the 10. I haven't heard it, so I don't have context for it. So it's hard. But I want people to know that I am super behind this album. I love this album. This is a lot of fun. I strongly recommend that you go and listen to this. Listen to one of the introductory tracks that we suggest. I think all the singles are great for that purpose. You get a wide variety amongst them. There's 4 of them. In Spite of Ourselves, Girls and Boys that you talked about is one of them. Creatures is one of them, and Ain't Nice is the other. All
or
great.
Toad from my perspective, but yeah.
I just mean those are the singles that have come out for the album.
Sorry.
And those, I think, encompass a lot of the album. Like, if you just go watch the videos, I think there's like some really cute videos, especially for Ain't Nice is a great video I watched. And watch all the other ones, but there's like a narrative going on. It's pretty cute. It's nice. It's a great sales tactic. But like, I don't know. I just had so much fun with this. I'll probably return to this. This is probably, it's hard to say this in like halfway through January. So we'll see if I turn around this. But this is probably going to be on my end of the year list of like top albums. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was just such a strong outing, and it's one of those records that, like you said, like a brass record, sort of this more intellectually orientated record, it can sometimes suck the fun out of the music. And this album is just so fun to listen to, man. And yeah, it makes me happy to be a music fan.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's episode 2 in the books. I am excited to post this one because we're on Spotify now. We got a few other things I got to set up. We got an RSS feed. We will have a website with which embeds these that we'll be posting. So there's some stuff I'm excited about coming up.
Oops.
It might be posted as long with this episode. So you might already know this by reading the episode, but at the end, I'm super excited. So I'll see you next week.
Okay, yeah, see you next week, and hopefully we can keep a good streak of records going.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't. We'll see. I've seen some of the options, and I'm not excited. All right. Well, I'll see you next week. We'll see what we're gonna review then.
Okay, cheers, everybody, and check out Welfare Jazz. You won't be disappointed.